Zindi is the largest platform for data scientists and AI practitioners in Africa. We have over 75,000 people. I started Zindi when I was living in South Africa. I'd been working in the international development space. I actually had gone to South Africa for another job, but also to build a data platform as well. And so that's how I ended up meeting my co-founders. They were running a data science consulting company that we ended up hiring. Couple days our site crashed because we were getting hundreds of signups and we didn't even expect for it to go that quickly. To launch it, literally like those first few days, we did 2 events, like one in Nigeria, one in South Africa. Then social media started taking off because of the people that I had already been in touch with. I'm constantly monitoring whether it's a time where we can do more experiments, try more things, or are we getting back down to the narrow focus. In those moments when we were just trying to survive, it was kind of like, stop doing anything that doesn't lead to money through the door right now. I think when you think about community, it's like understanding the dynamics that people in that community are feeling and finding ways to meet them where they are. I realized much later that the path that usually people take to start a company is maybe they're working a full-time job in a certain industry. They come up with an idea that's somehow related, in some ways related to the things that they're working on. And then they kind of self-fund that startup. They bootstrap the startup through the salary and the work that they're doing. And then once they get to an MVP or they start to get some traction, then they'll quit their job and all in on that problem. What's good about people working in the industry, they're usually kind of experiencing or identifying a gap or an opportunity. I've talked to people who want to start something and I find it hard to kind of, get excited for them when it feels like they're grasping at straws, like they're just inventing stuff. Yeah. The deeper their understanding of like some kind of pain point that someone's experiencing, whether it's a business or a customer or an individual, like I think that sets you up well for starting a company. That raising capital is the same as sales. So if you're familiar with like a sales process, you can kind of apply a lot of the same principles to investors. So it's a funnel, it's a funnel. People do say you have to kind of like talk to like 100 people, to get down to like one lead investor.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm joined by Celina Lee, who is a co-founder and CEO of Zindi. It is the largest professional network for AI practitioners, connecting over 75,000 data pros across 190 countries. Celina is a sought-out AI speaker. She's spoken at prestigious events like the UN LDC5 conference, and she's just advocating for a more inclusive AI ecosystem. Most importantly, she's gone from working in a field she's passionate about all the way to starting her own company, which is a journey a lot of people want to learn from. So I'm very happy to have you here, Celina, to talk about your journey. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right into it. And I think the first thing I wanted to sort of understand is your perspective on what you were going to do in your career as a college student. What were some of the things that you wanted to accomplish back in your days at Columbia?
Oh, yeah, it's been that's so long ago, but super relevant because I guess I always say that like my career journey has been very circuitous, if that's the word. Like I've been all over the place and just kind of following, one step at a time and not necessarily always having a long-term vision on where I was going. But I feel like starting Zindi, I tell people that starting Zindi has been my dream job. It's kind of the culmination of all the things that had happened, but I had no idea that this is where I would land. So when I was in college, I studied applied math, minored in computer science. I did not know what that would lead to. I wasn't sure, a lot of my classmates ended up being like actuaries or maybe going for their PhD. Neither of those seemed very appealing to me. And so I didn't necessarily have a plan, except I had always enjoyed mathematics. And so that was kind of the reason why I even chose it, but not really thinking about what would happen next. When I graduated from college, though, I at the time, the big thing, and I guess it is still a big thing, was like to go work for a McKinsey or, a Deloitte, Accenture. So I ended up working for Deloitte in New York City, and yeah, but very quickly I also felt like, okay, this is not really for me. So I guess my whole career has been something like that, trying something and then saying, okay, this isn't for me. Let me try something else.
That's the reality of most careers that people don't really talk about. So when you realized this wasn't the right fit, what was your thought process on what to do next?
Oh my gosh. Um, I mean, that was really hard. In some ways, it took a lot of soul searching, but in other ways, it was an obvious answer, right? I mean, I think from the first day that I showed up in the office in corporate America, I almost immediately was like, what am I doing? Like, this, you know? And so I think in my gut, I always knew like this isn't the right place,
Mhm.
but soul searching in the sense that I had, you know, I'd gone to engineering school. I had always thought I was going to go into corporate America. You know, that was what all my friends were doing. So I actually didn't know how to change careers at the time. And then on top of it, you know, any job when you're that age, every job is requiring at least 2 years of experience.
Mhm.
So then it was like, well, I don't have any other experience. All my internships had been at like McKinsey, at like these engineering companies. And so, yeah, so it took a certain amount of soul searching in the sense that like I had to map a way forward. And yeah, and I thought, you know, there's something bigger in this world. I was in New York City. I'm living in that bubble.
Mhm.
It really felt like almost like, you know, a responsibility that I felt that, you know, it's like I should be doing something more like for myself, for the world. I kind of and I had met some people in my life throughout my life who had done the Peace Corps at some
Mhm.
point in their life. And when I started to look at other jobs in nonprofits or others, even in New York City, they wanted 2 years of experience. And I looked at the Peace Corps again. They gave 2 years, you know, basically it's a 2 year program. You get 2 years of experience working in development in another country. And so I took that leap of faith and I
Wow,
applied.
that is
And then,
amazing.
yeah.
That's wow. So to go from corporate consulting role, which a lot of people dream of doing out of college, and then realizing it wasn't the right fit for you, then to go to the Peace Corps. So did you have to convince anyone around you like this was the right move for you? Did they question your path?
I think people thought it was crazy,
Yeah.
you know, people in my life, but generally you know, generally I was supported, as in like it was a brave choice, I guess I would say.
Oh, got it. And so yeah, take me to like your Peace Corps experience. What was that like, and how did it maybe change your perspective on what was happening around you in the world?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually, you know, one of my first international experiences of really like being outside of the US. I'd grown up in California and hadn't traveled internationally much at all my entire life. So going to the Peace Corps was a huge, I mean, it was just a massive experience. I can't even explain it, like how much it changed my life and changed my perspective and changed my, you know, just everything about me. So I'm eternally grateful for that experience. I I lived in Panama, so I was assigned to Panama. I lived in a small indigenous village in the Darien jungle, which
Uh,
is like a very remote part of Panama. Uh, you know, I I was a community economic volunteer. I was meant to, you know, work on projects that had to do with economic development or community development. So one of the projects I did was starting a computer center in the village. They didn't even have really electricity. I mean, there was like one line that was going in for the street lights, and then sometimes people would run a line. I don't even know how we did it, but you know,
Plug into the main line if they want to use something.
and
Yeah,
then run it across the entire village.
yeah, yeah.
You know, so so people were kind of like, yeah, finding ways to connect, but generally, like houses didn't have electricity. We were living in huts, and it was the first computer center, like community computer center in the entire kind of province. And So that was the project I did. We got some donated computers. Yeah, we started doing classes for the kids, and then also then for the young adults. And I mean, it was incredible. Like one of the last field trip that we took was to go to the university, to the computer lab, and then see the internet for the first time. But to get
Wow.
there, we had to walk out like on a trail for like 10 kilometers out, then take a bus for another like hour down a dirt road. And then we got to the computer center. They got to see like on the internet, they got to see like information even about their own communities and their own culture, because like I said, a tour guide was bringing people in, so they got to see like pictures of people they knew on the internet, and they couldn't
Wow.
believe it.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it just, I mean, anyway, that was the field trip. And then when I went back a few years later, I was so excited because one of my students had gotten the job at the local health center, because when they asked him if he knew how to use a computer and he knew how to use Word, he could say yes.
That's awesome.
So he got a job from that.
That's awesome. So this is, I mean, a massive shift from what you were doing, maybe sitting down at a desk or traveling to meet clients, to now being in a remote area where you're helping bring the internet to a community. So yeah, that's amazing. And at that point, what were you thinking of what your future would look like? Was that like, hey, I found my passion and like my mission was this, or did you think this is just for now and I'll figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything, like, and I guess any, advice that I'd have for people is that, I did always, well, credit to my mom. Like, she always kind of did tell me, it's like, if you do the thing that you're excited about and you're passionate about and you love, you will find a way to make it work,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So kind of, I adopted that philosophy. And so in some ways, each step, it was kind of like I just figured it out along the way.
Yeah.
But I did have a faith, in the long term, that if I did the things that I cared about, I would excel at it, and I would be able to turn it into a successful, viable job or career, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so after the Peace Corps, from there, actually, I did end up continuing to work in the NGO, like nonprofit space
Hmm.
internationally. So then, I worked in Colombia, in South America. So I was kind of back and forth between projects in the US and projects abroad. And then I ended up going back to grad school to SIPA, which is the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia,
Hmm.
because at the point where I was in my career, like I was doing a lot of projects on the ground. And I mean, same, each step was just kind of like, okay, I guess I will go to grad school. I never thought I would go to grad
Yeah.
school, but it was just like, okay, I think it's time, because I think I was getting frustrated with the work that I was doing, in that it was really being guided by like powers above,
Mm.
the well, there's a parallel in the nonprofit world. You're kind of beholden to the donors,
Hmm.
and just as in the startup world right now, you're beholden to the venture capitalists.
Right.
So you kind of ended up, for me in the nonprofit world, you're really beholden to other decision makers at the top, or people who are making the decisions of where the investments capital would flow to. What is it actually important? What is actually the most impactful use? The best return on investment. Okay, I mean, we're talking in a context where USA just got closed down by the powers that be, but this is kind of the thing that I mean, is that USA, the approach that they would take is they would do research, they would do scanning of the environment, they would look at how they would get the best return on investment. So I guess, like, for me, I was interested in getting a peek over the fence
Yeah.
into kind of, the world of how do they make decisions? What's the research? What's kind of the more, I guess, academic and rigorous underpinnings of the decisions being made. So that's why I went back to graduate school. But what was exciting is when I got to back to Columbia for
Mhm.
grad school, I got in touch with my mathematics background, and I ended up taking mostly like economics, statistics, and that's when I started doing a lot of data modeling, which kind of paved the road for the work that I'm doing now.
Wow. So yeah, you're studying economics, quantitative analysis, and really focusing on the math side of things. Um, did you have an idea of how that was going to actually play out in your next role? Was that a skill set you were going after because you knew to get to that higher level understanding, you need to focus on data?
Well, it just fell in my lap, I'd
Okay.
say. And I mean, maybe some people out there can relate to this as well, is that because I went to Columbia for undergrad and I was in the engineering school, I didn't think I was smart anymore. I didn't think I was actually good at math anymore.
Right, right. I
Everything's graded on the curve.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I also, in my mind, thought I would never go to graduate school because I didn't think I was smart enough for kind of, in that space. And I think it fell into, I would say math and data fell back into my lap because when I went to SIPA, it's no longer that kind of technical, environment. So
Mm.
when I was taking the courses, again, like compared to my peers, I was like, oh, I know this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Your confidence was
My
boosted
confidence
again.
like took a little step
Yes.
up again.
I
And then I got really excited because, that was a turning point for me as well, because that's when I realized I could connect, you know, all the years that I was working in Latin America, like, doing groundwork and understanding the context and the environments of, of real people,
Yep.
and then connecting it with, data. And there was a lot of excitement at that time when I was in graduate school about how you borrow from, like, say, medical research fields, approaches, like the quantitative approaches that you would take from medical fields. So that at that time, let's say randomized control trials, RCTs, is something that is understood and easily understood in the medical field. It's
Mm.
you do statistical analysis, then there's a statistical side of it of, testing whether it's significant or not, those types of things.
Right.
And people started to apply that approach to development topics. So, does giving a microloan to a woman entrepreneur actually change her life? Does it actually make her life better? Like, those were the types of questions that researchers were asking. So I got really excited about that intersect of saying we can use statistics, data, and connect it to the world that I had been working on for the last few years.
Wow. That's very impressive. And so I'm really interested to see how this all is leading to Zindi. Like this is such a interesting path.
Um, Zindi is the largest platform for data scientists and AI practitioners in Africa. We have over 75,000 people across 190 countries in the world. I started Zindi, when I was living in South Africa. I'd been working in the international development space. I actually had gone to South Africa for another job that was in the international development space, but also to build a data platform as
Uh,
well. And so that's how I ended up meeting my co-founders. Is they were running a data science consulting company that we ended up hiring, and we started talking about how Kaggle, which is another data science AI platform that's owned by Google, but how we love Kaggle, but Kaggle was not serving the African market. And there's this opportunity, there's this gap in the market where, there's African data sets that are unknown, that are hidden, in the closets and the
mm,
servers of organizations and governments. Young people in Africa are extremely talented, extremely also motivated to pursue a career in data science and AI. That was the starting point. And we launched Zindi over 6 years ago now, but that was the starting point, was saying, can we build a Kaggle for Africa? And then even further than that, can we create those pathways for young people in Africa to pursue, develop their skills, showcase themselves, pursue a career in data science
mhm.
and AI.
That's amazing. And did you think of yourself as a founder or an entrepreneur at that point? Or were you simply saying, let's solve this thing and see where it goes? Like, how did you?
I did not know anything about this startup world. It
Right.
was really like, I just thought I wanted to build this.
Yeah.
It was kind of a passion project, for good or for bad, right? Because I don't think we ever really interrogated, is this a viable business? Is the market, how big is the market? All the stuff that the VC started asking, it was like, oh, I don't even, I don't know. Like,
At that point, what was the inspiration to go all in on that versus I'm sure you had other things going on in your life and other opportunities maybe or other
yeah.
things you could have built. So what made you really believe that that was the thing that you wanted to build?
I mean, it's back to the first thing that I said, which is like I recognized, I think from the beginning that this is my dream job.
Hmm.
So through all the hard, it's been a lot of sacrifices personally. I wouldn't say professionally because I do believe that this is giving me good professional experience, but I think, yeah, I mean, all the sacrifices, all the hard things that I've been through and, we've been through, as a company, like it's, it's worth it because, yeah, because it's something that I really believe is necessary in the world. So at the very least, I can say I've contributed.
Yeah.
Um, at the very least, that's what's going to happen. Is I can
Yeah.
at least say I've
That's
contributed.
that's awesome. I mean, I'm curious to hear your maybe the takeaway you have on what is the right problem to solve, because I think a lot of people struggle to start something because they have so many options and so many uh, possible paths. So there's like this analysis paralysis thing where they're like stuck and they don't go down one path for multiple years to solve that. And so, do you have any advice for someone that might be debating if they should, you know, go all in on one thing?
Part of, well, like one of the things that I think I've learned, but I don't know if it's true, you can maybe confirm with me, is that I realized much later that the path that usually people take to start a company is maybe they're working a full-time job in a certain industry. They come up with an idea that's somehow related, in some ways related to the things that they're working on. And then they kind of self-fund that startup. They bootstrap the startup through the salary and the work that they're doing. And then once they get to an MVP or they start to get some traction, then they'll quit their job and all in on that problem. To the question you asked, I would say that what's good about people working in the industry and then solving a problem, is that they're usually experiencing some kind of pain point. They're usually kind of experiencing or identifying a gap or an opportunity or and that makes a lot of sense. Like to me, that makes a lot of sense. Like I've talked to people who want to start something, and I personally, like, I don't believe, or I find it hard to kind of, you know, get excited for them when it feels like they're grasping at straws. Like they're just inventing
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not something that they personally are like you like feeling them or someone close to them, if they, the deeper their understanding of like some kind of pain point that someone's experiencing, whether it's a business or a customer or an
Yeah.
individual, like I think that the better positioning, that's a good first step, I think.
That's a great point. I agree. I think a lot of us, and I've been in that position, I'm like, I want to build something. And then you sort of sit there and you're trying to come up with ideas and brainstorm versus like you felt something and you're like, wait, there has to be a better way to do this. Um,
Yeah.
so let's like go back to Zindi, because when it was started, I'm curious, what was the initial product? What did it look like?
We just built a basic platform that hosted the data sets, that evaluated the solutions that came in. So one of the main features that makes the platform interesting is that you get real-time feedback on your models that you're building. So you're training machine learning and deep learning AI models on data, and then when you make the submission to the platform, you get a score back instantaneously, and you get placed on a live leaderboard. So it makes it very interactive and gamified. From there, it's the UX, and then it became all the add-ons, like then the universal leaderboard, the whole community leaderboard, and then figuring out how we allocate points, and just all the other stuff. Like just had to keep it over the years. It's just kept
Mhm.
building from there.
And so with that initial product, did you get traction right out the gate?
Yeah, we did. I mean, in some ways, I think because of my experience, like working with communities, like starting from with the Peace Corps, I think I do think I have pretty good instincts of how to kind of tap into community. And one of our values as an organization is that the community comes first.
Mm.
And, so we've always had this idea and vision that we're building community. So the first, I guess, our go-to-market, my go-to-market was like, I looked up on meetup.com and Facebook and, whatever, to see what groups there already were, what communities there were in Kenya and Nigeria and in Uganda. And as soon as we launched the platform, like I had already reached out to a few communities throughout Africa, and then I just hit the ground, and then we ran hackathons on the platform, a day here, a day there. We just did a whole roadshow of hackathons on the platform, but
Yeah.
with communities, and I would say the reception was so positive. It was so warm. Like, like almost immediately on social media, people were saying, I'm proud to be a Zindian.
Mhm.
Like, as in, I found a home. Like, I'm a data scientist, I'm African. Like, this is my place. Like, I'm proud to be a part of this, and so it was like really cool. Like, in the first couple days, our site crashed because we were getting hundreds of signups and we didn't even expect, like,
Wow.
for it to go that quickly. Yeah.
That was amazing. And was that mainly through the roadshow promotion, or just when you launched, even the first couple of days without marketing it, you already got traction?
It was, I think we did two, to launch it, literally like those first few days, we did two events, like one in Nigeria, one in South Africa. And then social media was just and then social media started taking off because of the people that I had already been in touch with. So that's what happened, like through, yeah, just word of mouth as well.
I love the building a community as the key to growth, as opposed to just throwing money at advertisement or whatever it might be. So, any key takeaways from those early days to grow community? I know you mentioned having hackathons on the ground and meeting people, and anything else that sort of was critical to your success.
Well, I think understanding the community. Well, I mean, I'm not African, but I guess I had been living there for a number of years. And then my co-founders were, African and data scientists. And so we were the audience in some ways, like I had, I would also wouldn't consider myself necessarily a data scientist, but I love data.
Mhm.
And my relationship with Kaggle was kind of the relationship that I think a lot of people have with Zindi. And so I can understand it. Like, on Kaggle, I would spend time, I would look at the data, I would love it. I wouldn't know how to get started. Like, this is another thing is like, we find that people in this field, and particularly in Africa, there's this whole term imposter syndrome that, gets used a lot. It's pretty common for people to feel, I guess, yeah, feel a bit hesitant to get involved. And I think that's like a big dynamic that, like, because I have empathy for that, because my co-founders have empathy for that, like we really focused on Zindi being a welcoming environment to everyone, and we also say like our tagline is like to make AI accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
And so we're always very conscious of like making beginner friendly, making pathways that are easy for beginners, like those types of things. So I think when you think about community, it's like understanding the dynamics that people in that community are feeling and
Mhm.
finding ways to meet them where they are. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. I actually haven't heard of that. Like, as crazy as that sounds, talking about the feelings of your potential customers and community members, and spending time to understand that and sympathizing with it. Um, I think you hear talk to users, understand what their needs are, but I think the emotional side of that is neglected often. It's more of like a professional transaction in the startup world. So that's really
Mm.
awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And so from there, over the past 6 years, the company's India has grown. So how do you think about like the success you've seen? Like, what's your feeling about the growth that you've experienced so far?
It's, it's been it's been a very steep learning curve. It's been, in so many ways, a tough journey. And I mean, interestingly, I think my networks are much more African founders. So I can kind of speak to that experience, and I know that experience, and I myself have experienced the experience in terms of like, the challenges of raising capital, the challenges of, um, or even just the context of like, if you're working in the African market, the market's very fragmented, the market's very complex. I mean, there's depending how you count it, there's 54 countries in Africa, and multiple language, 3,000 languages. There's just so many things happening. So I guess in some ways, like I feel very proud of where we've gotten. Like we've overcome a lot of challenges. It's kind of cliche. I heard this advice before, but that you really have to love what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because something's going to have to get you through the tough times.
Yeah. Maybe you can share maybe like one of those tough times in the early days.
I mean, okay, this is very real. This is very tough. But there was a time when we were trying to fundraise. So we haven't raised a lot of capital. Zindi was largely bootstrapped in the beginning, and then we raised a seed round that would be small by American standards, and then that's basically been our rounds. There was a few years ago, we tried to raise another round, and it was extremely difficult market conditions. But on top of it, I think, is Africa a large enough market? Do we have a strong enough business plan, scalable business plan? All of those things made it difficult to raise. So, what happens when startups reach those points? I mean, you have to make really difficult decisions, and you have to get, well, in a way, it's like you have to get crazy. In a way, it was just kind of like I had to tell myself, this is not a time for fear. Like, I can't be afraid of anything. And it's so scary when you're in those moments. But I think a lot of founders have probably experienced some versions of that, where it's kind of like nothing can be scarier than this. Like, I'm just gonna have to, and you just have to do whatever it takes. And also, one of my angel investors, I asked her, how do I navigate around this? And she was like, there's no navigating around it. You're navigating through it. And
wow.
Going straight in, and you're gonna do it.
Oh my, okay. That's so in those days where you're like, okay, this could be in some ways the end of it, like unless I find a way. I know I hear this a lot, like founders just find a way. So is there an example you can share?
You mean like what do you do in those moments? Like how do you solve this? I think there's a few lessons that I learned, like things like focus. Like, at that time, like it meant focusing down to like one single thing, so it was like all the extra stuff that you're maybe experimenting with, so I think that's the thing. Like as a founder, you have to be responsive. One of my investors also tells me it's like the competitive advantage that you have as a startup is your speed. So you can respond. So it's kind of like, you're in and out of, I feel like I'm constantly monitoring whether it's a time where we can do more experiments, try more things, or are we getting back down to the narrow focus, and so that's essentially what happened. That's something that I learned through that. It was kind of like I had to focus so hard. Like, it's like everything came down, and it was just like, stop doing anything. In those moments when we were just trying to survive, it was kind of like, stop doing anything that doesn't lead to money through the door right now. It was like, unfortunately. But then, as then because of that focus, then our revenue went up. We were able to raise a little bit more capital. Our value is community first, but during that time, we said, as an organization, our value is still community first, but right now, because the community is not paying us, we have to stop, investing in, outreach and our ambassadors. Like we had to cut certain things that fundamentally, in the long run, we know we want to go back to.
Got it. That is a great example of like those tough decisions. So thanks for sharing that. I think something we mentioned earlier is about your first like investor. And I wanted to just go back really quickly before we move forward. Like, what was the process of getting that first check? How many maybe like potential investors you have to talk to get that? But what was that first check experience?
And what I realized is that raising capital is the same as sales. So I think that if you're familiar with like a sales process, you can kind of apply a lot of the same principles to investors. So it's a funnel, it's a funnel. I mean, people say, like, I didn't take the numbers, but like people do say you have to kind of like talk to like 100 people, to get down to like one lead investor, for example, so that is, yeah, I mean, it's really hard. It's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. And then the other good advice that I got, though I did not know this when we did our actual raise, but is to run it like a project, like to almost treat it like a 3-month project, and have a work plan and like just manage it, like manage the time block, everything. Like it's, you're talking to investors here, like first pitches here, second conversations here, data room here, like, just put everyone into that funnel.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. And I know we're sort of going to wrap it up here. So I want to come forward to where Zindi is today, and maybe what you're really looking forward to in the future for Zindi as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're growing. I mean, the community is growing like quickly. We're really focused on developing a lot new features on the platform that strengthen that feeling of, well, of community, of identity, of, you know, um, one of the new things that we have is that people can export a CV from their Zindi profile. So all the projects that they work on Zindi like now become like a CV. And we had talked about people who are maybe trying to break into tech or trying to start their careers. Like that's the idea, is that a lot of young people in Africa, let's say, like are struggling to get their first job, and so we're trying to bridge that gap and help them get their their first job, even if they don't have work experience yet. They have experience on Zindi that is still super valuable.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about like the things that we're developing on the platform. And then aside from that, we say that we're a company with African roots but global reach, and that's finally becoming very true because we've started to do projects outside of Africa. And this year we have a collaboration with the government of Barbados, for example. And we'll be doing a lot of the same activities and introducing the platform in the Caribbean, in the Middle East, like so. Yeah, lots to be excited about.
That's amazing. Congratulations on that growth and success. I was just, before the call mentioning how I was researching the product, and I saw a lot of the community members are very active and celebrating their wins, and truly love the platform. So very impressed by your success and what you're doing. So thank you for sharing your story, for joining me on this early Saturday morning. And I really appreciate you taking time.
Thank you so much, Michael.